Hello there, this is your host Des, and you're tuning in to DY Sensei. If there's anything you need to know about us, it's these three things. We want to keep you healthy, happy, and give you that heart for positive change. Now, in the last month, we've been setting that foundation for change. That's the right mindsets and knowledge to help you believe that change in yourself is possible. Now, for this week, we're going to be looking at confident humility. Now, what is confident humility? It means that you're believing in yourself while knowing that you don't have all of the answers. It gives you a reason to listen to others and to cherish the knowledge and experiences of those around you. Now, let me tell you a story about a young friend of mine, Dave. Dave was known to be a very physically and mentally resilient young guy. From a young age, he studied very diligently while working 2 jobs and volunteering at many places. It was through all of this he had become a very sturdy person, never burning out no matter how much you gave him for work. Now, for real, if you were to compare him to your average person, he would seem like he was Superman. His energy and mental capacity was at 200% of your average person's. His memory was also so good that so many people around him believed that he had photographic memory. Now, because of all this, he was also one really cocky son of a gun. He would always want to look perfect and competent before everybody, meaning he would rarely ask questions or seek help. Instead, he would do everything by himself, even when he was in a team or led those teams. Now, with such a fantastic memory, he also chose not to use assistive tools, like keeping record of stuff on a notepad or a calendar. When work gets busy and maybe even overwhelming, he really did make a lot of mistakes by forgetting to do those stuff, or just by making plain easy mistakes that could be solved by writing stuff down. Now, things might have gone like this for who knows how long, if not for a terrible accident he had. Now, during a fencing lesson, or fencing session at a fencing club, where you duel people with a foil blade or other fencing blades, he was doing some warm-ups, running from wall to wall as quick as he could, and he overexerted himself and tripped over a fencing platform at the end of the gym, and he rammed his head against the super solid white brick walls of the gym. The next thing he knew, he was out for maybe an hour or two, and it was the end of the fencing session. He was sitting on the sofa with an ice pack to his forehead in the fencing club's lobby, and his head was pounding like crazy. He was told that he was knocked out and eyes wide open. When he came to, he wanted to drive home himself, but luckily for him, he had his younger cousin around. His younger cousin kept him from driving, and luckily he did, because as soon as he got into that car and the car started moving even an inch, he was about to let everything out from his stomach. Now, little did he know that throughout the next 2 weeks, he would still be this nauseated every time he sat in an accelerating car. Even worse, his also mighty memory began failing him. He struggled to remember many things, from the name of coworkers that he worked with every day to the words that he used often. Those words would float before him or sit at the tip of his tongue, and he just couldn't grasp it. Now, worst of all was his mental and physical capacity. From being Superman at 200%, he was now at 5% of a normal person's ability. Thinking, reading, and even focusing on stuff for even a few seconds would tire him out and give him a bad headache. At that point, he was really just a husk of his former self. His family doctor told him it's hard to tell how long he'll need to recover, but with his post-concussion syndrome this bad, he might need a 2-year break like Sidney Crosby. To Dave, this was a shock. How could he take a 2-year-long break from all his duties, from putting a pause to his graduate studies, to work, volunteering, and leading the different organizations he was involved with? But still, he was a very prideful and stubborn guy, just like he was before the concussion. So he decided to only take a 2-week break and get back into everything again. And what do you expect? His mental and physical capacity was still at 5%, and even though he refused to back down. Now, unfortunately, many of his responsibilities weren't done properly or even at all because of his limitations then. Thoughts began crawling into his mind. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it. It's impossible for me now. How could he push forward with his brain being a puddle now? Dave remembers clearly as he walked into a meeting room with his graduate supervisors and mentors sitting all around him. He took a seat with his shoulders hunched over, arms stuck closely to his body, and hands that constantly shook in fear and anxiety, knowing now that he was pretty much a failure before everybody. And he spoke in a shaky voice about his struggles with his memories and how he was getting constant burnouts, believing the worst from the faces looming over him. But what came instead were words of compassion and understanding, his mentors telling him that he needed to speak up about his vulnerabilities, and that he needed to seek help when he needs it. Being academics who encouraged growth and a degree of independence, they didn't want him to be dependent on them, but to stand on his own feet while relying on them. They wanted him to be more interdependent and rise above his limits that were now so much more obvious than before. So through their encouragements and mentorship, he decided to get feedback from them, and even began using calendars and taking notes to compensate for his memory problems. When he returned to leading the organization he was a part of, he chose to tell his team, I'm here, even though it's hard for me to be doing all this, but I need your help. He chose to be vulnerable and lean on his team by delegating tasks instead of shouldering everything by himself. And true enough, he was able to accomplish all of his responsibilities beyond his physical and mental limitations. The words in his head went from I can't to I can and I have the support. And slowly but steadily, well, he did recover well from his post-concussion syndromes, pushing the limits from 5% up to 10%, then 20, 30, 45, and maybe even 75% by the end of that year. He was able to earn the respect and admiration from his colleagues and mentors just by showing his vulnerability, demonstrating leadership by mobilizing his team effectively, and, well, asking for help so that he doesn't make as many mistakes despite his memory problems and his limits. It was one hell of a thing he had gone through, but nonetheless, even to this day, he cherishes this experience because of what it taught him about confidence, humility. So, what are the 3 main points of confident humility that he learned? There are 3 things. First, kill the ego. You want to move away from arrogance and pride. Number 2, true maturity is interdependence, not dependence and not independence. And third, have self-compassion for yourself. Now first, kill the ego. In psychology, the ego is said to be our idea of self, or the I. When I'm talking about the ego, I'm talking about your arrogance and inflated sense of self. It's the pride you have in yourself that keeps you from listening to other people. Sometimes it keeps you from even asking questions because you're too proud and don't want to look incompetent. It creates the fear of asking questions, or even sometimes the fear of failure because it'll tarnish your clean slate. We think that if we fail, it'll just reinforce those thoughts in ourselves or others that we're a failure and we can't do anything right. Now, if I were to look at confidence on a spectrum, I could see arrogance and despair on different ends. Maybe it's low confidence and high confidence. Maybe it's even humbleness and arrogance on different ends. But there is a better way to see this and to achieve that confident humility. And that's through Adam Grant's view of it. Now, Adam Grant is a social psychologist and the author of some fantastic books. One of his books, called Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know, is a great read. Now, in his book, he separates confidence into two parts. There's confidence in yourself, and then there's confidence in your tools. We can then look at confidence in a 2x2 matrix with confidence in self on one side and confidence in tools on the others. Now, when you're confident in yourself, it can be split into two parts. So that's being secure or insecure about yourself. Meanwhile, confidence in your tools can be split into another two parts, whether you're certain or uncertain about your tools. These tools can be literally physical tools that you use, your lens that you use to see the world or situations, or even the knowledge you have. Now, when we start to mix and match these different ways of having confidence in ourselves and our tools, we get a total of 4 different outcomes. When you're secure in yourself and you're very certain in your tools, that can lead to blind arrogance. You're so sure of yourself and that you have all of the answers from the knowledge and tools that you don't bother questioning if there's any better explanations out there. In Dave's case, this was before his literal and figurative fall. He was too confident that he had all of the answers and was full of himself that he didn't bother using the human and other resources around him. Then there's being insecure and being uncertain about your tools. That leads us to debilitating despair. We're not sure of ourselves and we're not even sure if we have all of the answers or tools to achieve the things we want. When Dave recovered from his fall, he lost his confidence in himself and he was a nervous wreck with thoughts like, I can't do it, it's too much for me, or I'm a failure. He knew he didn't have all of the answers or tools to accomplish his responsibilities because he never used them. The multiple failures that he faced when he didn't rely on anything or anybody else made him shake in his boots before his mentors. And in that way, he had debilitating despair. Now, moving on to being insecure about ourselves and certain in our tools, we've got inferiority complex. Imagine those moments when you've seen somebody succeed and you're being envious. You say, I could have done that. Or you knew that you had the tools to accomplish it, but you didn't do it. Maybe you lacked the confidence or motivation to do it. In a way, while you were envious, you were also insecure in yourself while acknowledging you had the tools to get it done. Now, last, we have confidence humility. That's when you're secure in yourself, but also uncertain about your tools. Confidence in yourself doesn't mean you believe you're totally confident at that specific moment, but sometimes you've got the potential to learn and grow into competence. You realize that you don't have all of the answers and you never will, so you keep your eyes and your ears open to find new ways of approaching the situation. This was Dave when he started to believe in himself again, even though his mental and physical capacity was at 5%. He knew that he didn't have all of the tools to accomplish his work, but he was open to look out for them. He chose to ask questions, and he chose to seek help, and even using assistive tools like the calendar and notebooks that he didn't use before. Now, talking about confident humility, there's a great tip in achieving it. It was something that my own mom practiced a lot when working with all sorts of people. In her own view of the world, she saw herself as an equal to all people, not above nor below anybody. After all, we're all born human in the same way. We all have the same genes, kind of, and nobody's genes are more superior or inferior than the other, right? Sure, there are kings and queens, people born into families with a silver spoon in their mouth, and those born with nothing but rags. But in the end, we're all deep down the same. We all make mistakes, we all have things we don't know, and when we start believing and understanding that we are all inherently equal, we don't idolize another, nor put down other people. Idolizing other people will make you take everything they say at face value, and you might be at your knees, groveling before them. And in a way, it's showing that you have lower confidence in yourself when you're in front of these people. Now, when you put yourself above others, meaning that you put others below you, you're more likely to dismiss their thoughts and opinions. You're more confident in yourself, and maybe you're more arrogant in that way. You think you have all of the answers compared to them, and you won't be willing to listen. Now, fortunately, when you see others as your equal, you're more likely to be confident. Remember, you're not just putting everybody else at an equal level and yourself below them. When you're truly putting yourself as their equal, you won't see yourself as a nobody or a failure. Instead, you start valuing fairness and you feel more confidence in yourself and be willing to listen to others. Okay, great. Now we've learned more about confidence, humility, and how we can achieve that. Now, to guard ourselves against our arrogance, we should be cautious of the Dunning-Kruger effect. So Dunning and Kruger, they were social psychologists who looked at how knowledge affected confidence. Usually, you'd expect that when you gather more knowledge, you build up more confidence, almost in a linear way. But Dunning and Kruger found something a little bit more interesting. They found out that, you're still a novice, of course. You're a beginner at something, you have little knowledge, and so you have little confidence. So obviously, you'd be less sure of yourself and more willing to listen and learn. The interesting part was when we became an amateur at something. When we're still not a pro, but we've gained some knowledge about the topic, our confidence spikes. We become too overconfident in ourselves, even though our knowledge is still not great enough to match that confidence. This is what they call the Dunning-Kruger effect, or Mount's stupid. You're still an amateur, but you think you've got it all. Think of the times when we were teenagers or early undergrads in post-secondary. We were so full of ourselves, thinking we understood so much or everything about the world, even though we were just barely a hatchling that came out of its egg. Now, that isn't to say that teenagers or young college students are only ones who are susceptible to this. It happens to everybody at any age and any stage when they're learning something new and getting into something new. And because of that, we need to be on guard for this. Otherwise, we keep ourselves on Mount Stupid instead of hopping off it and learning more from others. Remember, the smartest people are those who know that they don't have all of the answers and that there's always more to learn. Now, let's move on to the second points that Dave learned for confidence humility. First was killing the ego. Second now is that maturity is interdependence. Let's start talking about maturation from the beginning. At the start, we begin as dependents. Imagine when we were babies. We were dependent on others like our parents or caregivers for help. We always focused on the you for help. You do this for me, you are responsible for me. And as we grow up into our teenage phase, we become independent. We like to focus on the I, me. I will get this done, I can do this myself, I'm responsible for myself. Being independent is great. It shows that we're self-reliant, and the best change is usually done involving ourselves. But that isn't the pinnacle of maturity. There are many points when people are stuck in this phase, though, even beyond their teenage years. Now, at the top of that mountain of maturity, we have interdependence. It's not dependence or independence. It's interdependence. That's inter, meaning between, like between people. Like interactions, interpersonal relationships. When we're interdependent, we focus on the we. We can accomplish this together. We're responsible for this together. Interdependence is the mix between independence and dependence. It's using the you and the I together to create the we, to do more than what each of the single yous and I's can do alone. Look at Dave, when he was full of pride and relied solely on himself. There was only so much he could do by himself. It became even more evident how little he could do when his mental and physical capacity had gone down to 5%. Yes, he didn't go dependent on others, but he also tried to do his best while leaning on others for help to do more. And with the help of his mentors, friends, and colleagues, even if he was at 5% or 25% of himself, he was able to do more. His personal inputs could have been at 25%, but he was able to put an output of 75%. He wasn't limited by his own personal and physical limitations. When we work together with others, we can go beyond our limits, synergizing with them, maximizing our knowledge, the different lenses that we bring to the table, and even the different talents that each and every one of us has to create outstanding solutions that we couldn't do by ourselves. Imagine all those wonderful things around you right now. From the technology, maybe it's the building and the landscapes. Not one person had created all these things by themselves. They were all created through the talents of and knowledge of many people together. and even brought to you through many people together. In that way, I encourage you to reach out to others if you need help. It's not to be independence, but to be interdependence. Now, finally, the last points we can learn from Dave is this: have self-compassion. Remember, compassion is goodwill and empathy together. It's wishing well for another person while understanding how they feel. It's being soft, forgiving, and encouraging. If you can be compassionate with others, why can't you be compassionate with yourself? Wish well for yourself and truly understand your own situation. There could be things outside of your control sometimes. Maybe we make mistakes, we have shortcomings, but we can still forgive, encourage, and love ourselves. Sometimes, for self-compassion, it's important to be able to separate our present selves from our old selves. Imagine two different circles that could overlap each other. One circle represents your past self, and the other circle represents your present self. The more overlap there is, the closer you tie your old self to your present self. The less overlap, the more you feel disconnected between your current and old self. And generally, when we want to change and have self-compassion, it's easier to do that when we have less of an overlap. Change, whether it's good or bad, it can be very difficult and can evoke negative emotions in us. We might feel regrets, guilt, or even anxiety, no matter how positive the change is. When we tie our present self to our past self too tightly, we become resistant to that change. And that leads to those negative emotions. Now, when we tie our past selves to our current selves, and sometimes even to our past successes to our current self, that makes us also afraid of moving forward to something new, away from our past success. Look at Dave, for example. When he was broken and not being able to do what he needed to do alone anymore, he felt like a failure. He tied himself too closely to his old self, his past Superman capabilities. Then when he started to see failure, he started to let those failures define him and paralyzed him in a way. And then afterwards, when he started to move forward, he sets his past self apart from his present self. He decided to do more and better with the help of others when he didn't have his past successes and failures defining and holding him back. When you begin showing self-compassion to yourself, you begin to see things holding you back as unfortunate instead of being unfair. You don't bash on yourself, or maybe you don't even feel resentful about your situation, but you start to understand that things can be difficult and you were just unlucky. You'd also learn to more easily forgive yourself and understand yourself if you thought things were unfortunate. When you think things are just unfortunate, you also would start to have a mindset where you think that there's always more opportunities moving forward. Sometimes failures help you fail forward too, bringing you even closer to success. Now, that's another point I want to make, that failure can be a beautiful thing. It teaches us more, a lot more than successes. It helps us build resilience when we fail so many times. We're not afraid of failing anymore. And in a way, when you think about it, those failures become a part of your personal story about how you overcame those hurdles to be where you are today and who you are today. Imagine a child learning to rollerblade for the first time. The first fall is the scariest, but the falls that come afterwards become something that's we're either used to, we learn from, or something we're not afraid of anymore. So remember to have self-compassion for yourself. When you see yourself as an equal to others, you'd want to treat yourself in that same way as you treat those others. Showing compassion not just to others when they fall, but to yourself when you're in that same place. I know this because if you didn't already know or have guessed, Dave in the story was me. And with that being said, I thank all of the mentors and friends who were there for me to help me when I was at my lowest, so I could do way more than I could ever. But most of all, learned confidence, humility, and take that into everything that I do. Now, bringing it all back together, remember, if we want confidence, humility to maximize our growth and change, we need 3 things. 1, to kill the ego and move away from our pride. We can see others as our equal. We're not above or below others. And be careful to not be stuck on Mount Stupid. Number 2, be interdependence, not dependence or independence. When we focus on the we instead of the you or I alone, we can do way more. And number 3, have self-compassion. Love, forgive, and hope for the best for yourself, as you would have for those you care and love. Now, none of these things are easy, but when we start doing those things and keep at it, we can really get to confidence, humility. We'll be confident in ourselves while knowing that and believing that we don't have all of the answers, but it's okay. And that sums up this episode. Next week will be a talk on relationships, just like for Valentine's Day, but not just for between romantic partners, but also between family and friends too. So be sure to tune in for that episode. Now, if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to tune in to our next episodes every Tuesday morning. If you found it engaging or helpful, please give your feedback in the comments. Make sure you rate and follow the podcast, or subscribe if you're watching from YouTube, and share it with your friends and family. We need it for this podcast, and for those who've been sticking around, we really appreciate you. If you have any other questions or want to share your knowledge or experiences on this podcast, be sure to contact me at DY Sensei at dysstudios.com. That's DY Sensei at dysstudios.com. With that said, class dismissed.